Hey guys, welcome to the Tommy Brideson Show. Now today I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into squatting, in particular how you can get the most out of your squat by simply understanding your endpoint, understanding where you need to be in space, and then just reverse engineering it. Now, when we're looking at squatting in general, it's a pretty simple movement. You stand up, you squat down, and you stand up. Now, there's a lot of nuances around that, and there's a lot of technique points, but I think we can simplify it. I think we can break it down into what I call linchpins, 3 main linchpins. If we break it down to your upper back positioning, your midsection and your core positioning, and your leg positioning and stiffness that you create, it really simplifies squatting, but it also then allows you to have a consistent way that you squat time and time again, which will then allow you to make refinements to your technique. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been having some really good conversations with my staff, my rehab team, and we've kind of been talking about like how to get the most out of your squat by doing, in essence, a little bit less. So when you understand where you need to be in space, what ends up happening is it just provides a lot of clarity. And then if something is going wrong, like say for instance, you're squatting and you're getting some hip pain, when you have a consistent way of doing things, then it's very easy to sort of diagnose where things are potentially going wrong and how we can improve on it. Now, when I get someone in for an initial coaching session, I will always ask them, what does a squat look like for you? And in more cases than not, it will kind of be like, oh, I grabbed the bar, I jumped under the bar, and I walk back and I squat. And, straight up, I'm already thinking like there's no real process that's in place. There's no real logical sort of formation about how they actually approach the squat itself. So from my perspective, I'm like, the best value add I can do for that person is to give them a framework that they can use to squat. Now it's like, building a pool, for instance. You're not just going to just dig a hole in the ground, throw some concrete in and fill it up with water. You're going to have a plan about how you go about it. So the similar concept remains with squatting and training in general. So we take a bit of a bird's eye view on it, overlooking it, and then we go, okay, how do we get to point B? So what I wanted to do now is kind of jump into the 3 linchpins and kind of break them down a little bit and give a bit of a logical framework around how to use them. So if we look at linchpin number 1 is the bar position on your back. Now the bar position on your back is really crucial. It has to be glued to your back. It has to be so stiff, stable, and rigid that when you're squatting, you're not thinking about it. So it requires quite a lot of attention. And you need to stack your upper back, your shoulder blades, and your rib cage in a way that isn't going to move during a squat. Now that seems simple in theory, but depending on your muscle mass, depending on how well your ribs move, it might be slightly different for each person. So when you're getting under the bar, what you kind of want to be doing is thinking about elongating through your ribs. Now, what that height is going to do is it's going to pull your shoulder blades down by default. I don't often cue people to actually squeeze their shoulder blades in because what ends up happening is it's quite a weak movement. Like your shoulder blade muscles aren't very strong. So I'm not going to get someone to hold, say, 200 kilos on their back by squeezing their shoulder blades. I think the better way of thinking about it is getting a high chest and reaching your chest up towards the roof. Because what that's going to do is it's just naturally going to pin your shoulder blades down. Then from there, if you actively pull the bar down into your back, then you've just created a shelf for the bar to sit on. The muscles are active, the bar feels attached to your actual rib cage and the muscles that are sitting there, and you're pretty good to go. So when you're looking at that, it's generally just getting stiffness and rigidity, but I don't think we need to put the emphasis on actually squeezing the shoulder blades because if you get yourself in the right position, it takes care of it anyway. Now, the second linchpin that I want to go through is breathing and bracing. Now, you'll often see powerlifters, for instance, wearing a belt. And the whole ethos of that is that it's just trying to create a little bit more pressure through your midsection. Now, when you're looking at breathing and bracing, you have to be able to brace your abs to be able to then get air in to create expansion through your midsection. So just breathing in and creating expansion isn't enough. You need to create like a hard exterior shell for it to then expand into. So that's what the belt essentially does. Now, when we've got a really good brace, what it does is it connects the rib cage and it connects the pelvis together. It holds, it's like the glue. But when that's not done right, what you'll end up seeing is you'll see people during a squat changing position through their pelvis, through their upper back, the hips might lift, or, it shows up in a few different ways. But if you get that brace right, your squats honestly go from feeling like a 9 RPE to a 5 RPE. And that's no word of a lie. It really is the glue that holds your squat together. So the first linchpin sets the bar on your back where you hold it. And then you kind of set and forget. The second linchpin really connects your rib cage and your pelvis together. That's when we start to get that communication between the upper and the lower body. Really, really awesome stuff. So how I think about doing that is you've got to think about your abs as like literally a stiff wall. So how you actually create it is a massive breath out. So you exhale down as hard as you can. And if you're sitting there now, actually do a massive breath in and then exhale as hard as you can. What you'll feel is your abs come on. They start to get tensioned up, and that is the stiffness you then hold. You don't let go of that stiffness, you hold it. Then from that position, what you want to do is, there's a saying, it's called slow goes low. So if you draw your air in 3 to 5 seconds, what you'll feel is a really big global expansion through your midsection. That's what we're chasing. So if you've previously created the tension through your abs, then you've breathed in. What that does, it naturally gets this expansion through your midsection. That is what we're then going to hold and squat with. Okay, so that's linchpin number 2. Now, linchpin number 3 is moving into the lower body, into how you create stiffness, but also how you control where you are in space. So your center of mass is really important with squats. If you're sitting too upright and pushing your knees way too far forward, what ends up happening, all your weight shifts forward. And the same happens if you're shifting all your weight backwards. So we kind of need to find a middle ground so that when you're squatting, there's no weight shift. And that's where the lower body and the linchpin number 3 comes into it. So when you stand up from the squat, you've got the bar set on your back, you've got your brace set, and you walk the squat out, or you've stood up in a mono, you then want to shift a little bit of weight into your hips. So it's like a little partial hinge. From that position, you then twist your quads away from each other. A common cue is push your knees out, but I think we need to more so think about what's happening at the hip. So it's more twist the quads out. Then into the hole, you actually need to start to create an active movement. It's not a passive drop into the hole. You're actively thinking about twisting your quads out and pulling yourself into the hole. And what ends up happening is your legs get out of the way for your pelvis to essentially fit between your legs. And if you're looking at a squat side on, what ends up happening is you've got that bar set on your back, you've got a slight hinge with a really strong brace. And as you're descending into the squat, you won't see a movement at all, forward or backwards, in your torso. You'll just squat basically upright and down in the same position. So your torso will remain exactly where it is from start to finish. And that is a really good indicator that you have a good brace, you're in a good position, you're not loosening upper back tension, and you're keeping the weight in your legs. So when we're looking at squat, it's often spoken about where you can use exercises to bring up weak points, you can work on range of movement and everything in between. But the reality is, if you know where you need to be in space and you know how to create stiffness and you know the movement and the outcome that you're trying to do, it cleans up so much of your actual movement pattern itself. And then squatting becomes so much more enjoyable. Now, from like my position, I'm a physio, I'm a strength coach, and I see a lot of people come in from different areas. So I'll have someone coming in from a rehab perspective, I'll have someone coming in from, wanting to be a really good powerlifting perspective, but then we also have people that come in that just want to train to add to their life and their lifestyle. So the commonality of all of those is they all follow the same principles of these linchpins: getting your back set, getting your brace on, and creating that stiffness through the lower body. Obviously, a powerlifter is going to go into a bit of a rabbit hole and really get into the nuances of things, and they're going to really sort of overemphasize, and their risk reward is obviously a lot different. But the reality is they all have the same set of principles, and then you can just add layers to it. Like I often talk to my clients about it. I say it's like an onion, right? You've got a big onion and you take a layer off. There's always another layer under it. So you take another layer off. And, if you're at the very start of your training journey, sweet, you've just taken the outside layer of the onion off. But if you're sort of down towards the powerlifting side and you're really maximizing your position and you're trying to get the most out of your training, you've taken quite a few layers off. But everyone needs to start with this baseline and this exterior linchpins. Start with the back position, start with the midsection in a brace, and create tension through the lower body. Now, if we go just like another step onto this, right? So sometimes you actually can't get into the position. So this is where like physio and treatment and range of movement comes into it. For instance, with the back positioning, some people can't physically get their arms back of their body, right? So it's going to be very hard for them to hold a bar on their back. So there's different things that we can do. We can work on range of movement. You can also pull out pinkies and stuff like that to give you a little bit more passive range. But the reality is sometimes you actually can't get into these positions that you need to be in to start with. So someone's journey might actually start at working on range of movement, positioning, getting them in a position where they can actually squat, and then adding the linchpins in more meaningfully. So everyone comes in a slightly different angle, but the reality is they all still follow the same sort of principles. So if you come in from a rehab journey, you're literally progressing through range of movement and getting those fundamental movements that you need to be able to get into a linchpin position. But if you're on the top end and you're a powerlifting side, you might be looking at it from a bird's eye view and going, this is exactly where I want to be. How do I get to that position? So then you might have a movement strategy or a warm-up program in place that's going to allow you to get into a better position over time. So, the interesting thing is as well, like, we've got a lot of people that come to Strength Tribe at my facility that, don't actually train here as well. So they might come in for training and treatment. They come in just for technique sessions to sort of optimize their squatting, to optimize their patterns, or to potentially get them out of pain so they can do, say CrossFit or, functional fitness and training. So, with these guys, often what I'll say to them is, hey, can you show me your squat pattern? Or can you show me whatever movement we're looking at? Can you just show me? And quite often it is just, it's really easy to see from my perspective. You go, hey, that is missing some upper back tension. So then we might need to work on pillar one. Or you see them squatting and their back looks really tight, their legs look really strong, but there's no sort of stability through that midsection. So it's a really easy and logical way to look at it when you're starting to sort of, even just from a coaching perspective, look at it side on and try and figure out, where do I start? And, the reason, going back to my old days where I worked at a commercial gym, the reason I actually ended up going into physio was because I was sort of deep into learning about programming, and I was deep into learning about, all these different techniques and how I could get the most out of people's training. But what I soon realized, it was actually just positioning and getting people a better understanding of where they need to be in space. If you know where you need to be and you get it, not just through cues, like you actually get it, it's really easy to be able to go, hey, that's where I want to be. How do I create it? And even if it doesn't come naturally at the start, it's something that you can work towards. Like thoracic extension, pulling your shoulder blades down into that position isn't really a natural position. It's not something we really do, but it is something, if you know that's where you need to go or that's what you want to get out of it, you can work towards it. So, I am very passionate about, before adding things in, is actually about just giving people context around where they need to be in space. And yes, cues, but more so just context, so that then the cues that we create together from that coaching sort of relationship make more sense. So anyway, that's it from me today. I just wanted to jump on and give a little bit of a rundown of the squat. If you want to follow along, you can jump onto all platforms at Tommy Brideson. And if you want to jump onto my business account, it is strength.tribe, and follow along for all strength training and powerlifting things. See you in the next episode.